John Cutter, the name whispered in hushed tones in certain circles, a legend etched in blood and steel. Delta Force didn't just train him, they honed him into a weapon, a scalpel designed to excise threats with brutal precision, missions that defied logic. Operations deemed suicidal, Cutter had not only survived them, he'd mastered them. Medals weighed heavy in a box he rarely opened, each a testament to battles fought and lives taken. But that was then. Now, he was just John, a retiree seeking solace in the quiet embrace of rural Pennsylvania. He'd traded his combat gear for worn jeans and a comfortable sweater, the cacophony of war for the gentle rustling of leaves. His world revolved around Emily, his daughter. The sole reason he'd walked away from the only life he'd ever known. And Shadow, Emily's Belgian Malinois, was an extension of her, a furry guardian who mirrored her playful spirit. Cutter saw in Shadow a reflection of the loyalty and unwavering dedication he himself once embodied, a connection that warmed the corners of his hardened heart. He craved the normalcy, the peace, unaware that the ghosts of his past were about to be violently resurrected. The bond between Emily and Shadow was something special. A silent language spoken through shared glances and gentle touches. Shadow wasn't just a pet. He was Emily's shadow, a constant presence in her young life. He'd been a puppy when Cutter brought him home, a ball of fur tumbling into Emily's outstretched arms. From that moment, they were inseparable. He was her confidant, listening patiently to her childish woes and teenage anxieties, offering unwavering, non-judgmental support in the form of a wet nose nudged. He was her protector. His keen eyes always scanning their surroundings, his low growl a warning to any perceived threat. They'd spend hours exploring the woods behind their house, Emily chattering about her day while Shadow bounded ahead. His tail wagging furiously, he slept at the foot of her bed. A silent guardian against the nightmares that sometimes crept in. Cutter often watched them, a pang of bittersweet happiness in his chest. They had something he'd never truly known. Unconditional love. Uncomplicated by the shadows of war. He knew that Shadow was more than just a dog to Emily. He was family, a vital piece of her heart. The tranquility shattered on a Tuesday afternoon. A domestic disturbance call at the neighbors had brought 2 patrol cars to their quiet cul-de-sac. Emily was in the front yard, tossing a frisbee for Shadow. The officers, already on edge from the earlier call, saw Shadow as a threat, a large dog barking and running towards them. They yelled commands, but Shadow, in his playful exuberance, didn't heed them. A shot rang out. Echoing through the peaceful afternoon, Shadow yelped, crumpling to the ground, the frisbee rolling uselessly beside him. Emily screamed, rushing to his side, her hands stained crimson. Cutter burst from the house, his face a mask of disbelief and rage. The world seemed to slow, the idyllic scene replaced by a nightmare. Emily cradled Shadow's lifeless body, her sobs racking her frame. The officers, suddenly realizing the gravity of their actions, stammered apologies, their faces paling under Cutter's icy stare, but the words were hollow, meaningless in the face of Emily's devastation and the stillness of her beloved Shadow. The peace Cutter had so desperately sought was gone, replaced by a burning inferno of grief and righteous anger. The immediate aftermath was a chaotic blur of flashing lights and strained explanations. The officers, faces etched with a mixture of guilt and defensiveness, began their damage control. "He was a large dog, sir," one stammered, avoiding Cutter's gaze. "We followed protocol. He was aggressive." The other mumbled something about standard operating procedure and officer safety. A detective arrived, his demeanor cold and clinical. He offered a perfunctory apology, a practiced phrase that felt devoid of genuine remorse. "We understand this is a difficult time, Mr. Cutter. We'll conduct a full investigation." He handed Cutter a card, his eyes scanning the scene, seemingly more concerned with minimizing liability than offering comfort. As the hours passed, a narrative began to form, a narrative that painted Shadow as a dangerous animal, a necessary casualty in the line of duty. Cutter saw the subtle shifts in their body language, the carefully chosen words designed to deflect blame. They were building a wall, brick by brick, and Cutter knew, with a chilling certainty, that justice wouldn't be freely given. They didn't know who they were dealing with. They thought he was just another grieving father. They were wrong. Cutter's grief was a cold, hard knot in his chest, a familiar ache that resonated with the memories of fallen comrades. But this was different. This wasn't a battlefield. This was his home, his daughter's sanctuary, and the pain in Emily's eyes was a mirror reflecting his own helplessness. He watched her, heartbroken, as she struggled to cope with Shadow's absence. The empty dog bed a constant reminder of her loss. He initially tried to navigate the system. He called the detective, filed a formal complaint, and even contacted a lawyer. He believed, or perhaps desperately hoped, that the truth would prevail. But the detective was evasive. The complaints seemed to disappear into bureaucratic limbo, and the lawyer spoke of lengthy legal battles and uncertain outcomes. Cutter saw the writing on the wall. The system was rigged, designed to protect its own. The police department was closing ranks, and Shadow's death was becoming just another statistic, another footnote in the endless cycle of injustice. He knew then that he couldn't rely on the law to deliver justice for Shadow. For Emily, he would have to find another way. The full investigation was a sham, a carefully orchestrated performance designed to protect the department. Cutter knew it, and it fueled his resolve. He started his own investigation, a methodical dismantling of the official narrative. He spoke to the neighbors, patiently coaxing out details they'd been hesitant to share with the police. He learned that the officers had been agitated even before arriving at the scene. Fueled by a heated argument during the previous call, then came the body cam footage. A glitch had conveniently corrupted the audio, but the visual told a different story. IT showed Shadow wagging his tail, approaching the officers in a playful manner, not aggressively. IT showed the officer raising his weapon without clear justification, his finger already on the trigger. He also acquired internal memos, carelessly discarded, revealing a pattern of complaints against one of the officers, complaints of excessive force and a history of escalating situations. The evidence was mounting. A damning indictment of police misconduct and a deliberate attempt to cover it up. The truth was there, buried beneath layers of lies and self-preservation, and Cutter was determined to unearth it, no matter the cost. The evidence was damning, but useless if it remained hidden. Cutter knew that presenting it through legal channels would only result in more delays, more obfuscation. A decision solidified in his mind, cold and absolute. The time for playing by the rules was over. He descended into the basement, the air thick with the scent of dust and forgotten things. He unlocked a heavy steel box, the lock clicking open with a familiar sound. Inside, nestled in layers of protective foam, were the tools of his former trade. He ran a hand over the cold steel of a silenced pistol, the weight familiar and comforting. Muscle memory took over as he disassembled and reassembled it, the movements fluid and precise. The ghost of John Cutter, the Delta Force operative, was reawakening. He began a meticulous plan, a calculated pursuit of justice that would leverage every skill he'd honed over years of combat. He was no longer just a grieving father. He was a force of nature, a predator unleashed. The officers who had taken Shadow's life, and those who sought to protect them, were about to learn a harsh lesson. Some debts are paid in blood. Cutter's actions were precise and calculated, each move designed to dismantle the police department's carefully constructed facade. He started small, leaking the body cam footage to a local news station under a pseudonym. The story exploded, igniting public outrage and forcing the department to reopen the investigation. Then came the internal memos, anonymously delivered to the mayor's office, exposing the pattern of misconduct. The police, initially dismissive, began to realize they were dealing with something far more sophisticated than a grieving father. The leaks were too precise, the information too damaging. Surveillance teams were deployed, but Cutter anticipated their every move, disappearing into the shadows like a ghost. A sense of unease settled over the department, a creeping paranoia that they were being hunted. The detective who had initially dismissed Cutter now felt a growing dread. He pulled Cutter's file, digging deeper, and stumbled upon a heavily redacted military record. The pieces began to fall into place. John Cutter wasn't just a retiree. He was a weapon, and they had just armed him. The hunt had begun, and they were. The prey. A tense game of cat and mouse began, a deadly dance between predator and prey. Cutter moved through the shadows, a ghost in their machine, anticipating their every move. He used his knowledge of their procedures, their weaknesses, to his advantage. He exposed corrupt officers, revealing their illicit activities through anonymous tips to internal affairs, watching as their careers crumbled. He disrupted their operations, sabotaging drug busts and interfering with their surveillance, sowing chaos and distrust within their ranks. He never resorted to lethal force. Not yet. His goal was not simply revenge, but exposure, to tear down the wall of lies they had erected. Each calculated move chipped away at their authority, eroding their credibility. In the eyes of the public, the police department, once a symbol of order and security, was now a laughingstock, riddled with corruption and incompetence. The detective, consumed by paranoia, desperately tried to anticipate Cutter's next move. But he was always one step behind. Cutter was dismantling their operation piece by piece, exposing the rot from within, and they were powerless to stop him. The final confrontation took place at the police station, a symbol of the authority Cutter had systematically undermined. He didn't storm the building guns blazing. Instead, he orchestrated a carefully planned disruption, cutting the power, disabling the security systems, and releasing the evidence he had gathered to every major news outlet. Chaos erupted. He found the two officers responsible for Shadow's death cornered in a back office, faces pale with fear. The detective was there too, his gun drawn, a desperate attempt to salvage the situation. Cutter disarmed him with swift precision. A move too fast for the eye to follow. He didn't raise his own weapon. "You had a choice," he said, his voice cold and devoid of emotion. "You chose to hide the truth." The confrontation wasn't about bullets and bloodshed. It was about accountability. He forced them to confess, the truth pouring out in a torrent of fear and regret, all recorded and broadcast live. He left them there, broken and exposed, for the world to see. The explosive showdown was not a battle of firepower, but a war of truth, and Cutter had won. The aftermath was complex, a tapestry woven with threads of justice and consequences. The two officers faced criminal charges, their careers irrevocably ruined. The police department underwent a sweeping overhaul, purging corrupt elements and implementing stricter accountability measures. But Cutter's actions, while achieving a form of justice for Shadow and Emily, did not go unnoticed. The FBI initiated an investigation, focusing on his unauthorized access to police systems and his role in the orchestrated chaos. He could face serious charges, potentially jeopardizing his hard-won freedom. However, the outpouring of public support was overwhelming. Many saw him as a hero, a symbol of resistance against a broken system. Would the legal system dare to prosecute a man who had exposed so much corruption? The ending remains ambiguous. Did Cutter truly achieve justice? Or did he simply trade one form of injustice for another? He may have won the battle, but the war was far from over, leaving a lingering question of whether the ends truly justified the means, especially in the eyes of the law he circumvented. His victory was shadowed by the potential for severe repercussions. Emily's healing was a slow, delicate process, like tending to a fragile seedling after a storm. The initial shock and grief had subsided, replaced by a quiet sadness. She still missed Shadow terribly, his absence a constant void in her life, but she also saw the changes her father had wrought, the corruption exposed, the officers held accountable. She understood, perhaps better than anyone, the lengths he had gone to for her, the darkness he had embraced to bring light to their world. She found solace in the memories of Shadow, the playful moments, the unwavering loyalty. She started volunteering at a local animal shelter, finding comfort in caring for other animals in need. Cutter watched her, a flicker of hope in his eyes. He couldn't undo the past, couldn't bring Shadow back, but he could ensure that his daughter knew she was loved, protected, and that he would always fight for her, even if it meant sacrificing himself. The healing process was ongoing, but the seeds of hope had been sown, nurtured by love and the unwavering belief that even in the darkest of times, light could still prevail. The question that lingered was whether Cutter could ever truly return to his peaceful retirement. The events had irrevocably changed him, stripping away the veneer of normalcy he had so carefully cultivated. He had crossed a line, embracing the darkness he had tried so hard to leave behind. The skills he had once used for his country now served a more personal purpose, blurring the lines between justice and vengeance. Could he simply pack away his weapons and return to mowing the lawn, knowing that the system he had exposed was still flawed, still capable of inflicting pain? Or had he opened Pandora's box, unleashing a part of himself that could never be contained? The answer remained elusive. Perhaps he could find a new balance, a way to protect Emily without succumbing to the darkness that threatened to consume him. Or perhaps he was destined to forever walk a tightrope between the man he wanted to be and the weapon he was. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. John Cutter was no longer the man he once was. The price of justice had been steep, and the scars would forever remain. In the end, the story of John Cutter is not just about a dog, or a corrupt police department, or even a Delta Force operative seeking revenge. It's about the enduring power of grief, the unwavering bond between a parent and child, and the lengths one will go to protect those they loved. It forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about justice, about the price we are willing to pay for it, and about the very nature of right and wrong. Did Cutter truly achieve justice, or did he simply perpetuate a cycle of violence? Was his decision to circumvent the law justified by the circumstances, or did it undermine the very principles he sought to uphold? And perhaps most importantly, is violence ever the answer, even when driven by the purest of intentions? The answers, like the future, remain uncertain, but the questions linger, forcing us to examine our own beliefs and values, to consider the complexities of human nature, and to grapple with the enduring struggle between darkness and light. The echoes of Shadow's bark, the image of Emily's tears, and the steely resolve in John Cutter's eyes will resonate long after the story ends, prompting us to ponder the true meaning of justice and the heavy burden of love.